like to call the meeting to order, please. Meeting to order. This is the annual meeting of the Slate Valley Unified School District, basically to discuss the budget. Our first thing that we always do every year is to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Some housekeeping. Some people are online watching the presentation, and at the end of the presentation, they'll be free to ask questions through Chris and his team over there. Also, people who are in the audience tonight, even if you're not registered voters in the district, historically we have invited, if you have a question, we have invited your participation in the proceedings. Just some housekeeping things. Article 1, we need to elect the following officers to serve for one term. And these are calendar bound. So persons nominated this evening will serve from next June to next July. So I'm on a carryover. So the first position is for moderator.
I make a motion to elect Tom Spangenberg to continue in his role as moderator.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
For clerk,
I'll make a motion to nominate Liz McKay as clerk.
Second.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
For treasurer,
I'll make a motion to nominate
Done.
Dawn Custer as treasurer. She's presently the treasurer.
okay,
Second.
all right. And the remuneration for those offices are $500 for the moderator, $1,500 for the clerk and for the treasurer. Article 2, to hear and act upon the reports of the school district officers. Pardon?
We need to vote on Dawn.
We didn't vote on Don?
No.
All in favor?
All in
Just say
favor?
Aye.
Okay. Article 2, to hear and act upon the reports of the school district officers.
Ready? All right. So thank you everyone for being here tonight. If you don't know, I am Patty Beaumont, the chair of the Slate Valley School Board. It's really important to have our community present here tonight to ask questions and offer information and hear what we have to say. So thank you all for coming out. It is a rather nice night out tonight, which is nice instead of the 0-degree weather that we've been struggling with. But anyway, thank you. So we begin by sharing our successes and highlights of this past year. So as I start to talk about this, I do want you to be aware of the fact that this information, a lot of it is driven through the superintendent goals and our strategic plan. So we look at these successes and highlights through that lens and are very happy to report how well we've done and how proud we are of our SVU. Our staff retention rate soared from 78% to 93%. This was, in fact, one of our big goals in our strategic plan. And I just wanted to highlight that goal number 3, align resources with educational equity. And we were looking to recruit, develop, and retain high-quality educators and leverage their expertise. So as you see some of these successes and highlights, please think about the fact that we're trying to really highlight those items, not every single thing that happens in our district, which is significant. A lot of good stuff happens. Elementary students achieved notable gains in ELA and math, with many of our scores above the state average and some actually being the highest in our region. So let's see if I can figure out how to do this. So you might need to help me, Chris, on this one. What do I use to get that background slide that's in that little box
Arrow.
with the arrow? Just an arrow like that? Nope. The little box. The little
Not
box.
with that. You gotta do it with this.
Oh, you gotta use your keypad. Sure. There we go. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. All right, and here are our scores. I know that we're only looking at, obviously, a year here, a year's growth, but I think that we need to really celebrate the fact that our third, fourth, and fifth graders, as you can see, have exceeded the statewide averages, as I mentioned before. And we are very proud of that how they've done. Thank you.
How do you get back from it?
Just hit the slide. Just click on the slide. Thank you. And then where's the present mode? Slideshow. I think we're there. Awesome. Part of our strategic plan also is increasing our four-year graduation rate, which is now at 92%. And looking at our flexible education pathways. So this is in response to Act 77. And I know that I was asked recently what Act 77 is really all about. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to just remind people that what we're talking about here is, as it says, enabling students to explore diverse learning experiences and develop skills for success. So some of those are career and tech education, virtual learning, work-based learning, service learning, dual enrollment, and early college, of which all of our students have the opportunity to experience those varied ways of showing their success to graduation. And then, of course, the fact that our girls, this is last year, remember, so we want to celebrate our girls basketball team and our football team, who both won state championships. And then our increased number of high school choice students. So this is an important metric for us. We want to increase this as much as we can. And last year we did so by having 10 students coming into our district from other districts. Also increasing the number of students tuitioned into our district over the last 2 years. So that number has increased from 5 to 8. Number 8, increasing the student attendance rate each year over the last 3 years to 93% of our average daily attendance. Obviously, we would like it to be as close to 100% as possible. So we have worked hard, and our administration has worked very hard to make sure that this number increases, because if you're not in school, you're not learning, obviously. Reducing our staff absences. So COVID, as you can imagine, caused many people to be home for periods of time doing their work. And as we have gotten out of COVID in the last couple of years, there have been people who have needed to take days off for good reason, but it's been one of those things where they've asked for unpaid days. And we really want to change that kind of zeitgeist and get people back into being here as much as they possibly can. So we're happy to report that our staff absences have gone down by 8%. So 8% of the group is here more often. And this is due to the great work of our administrators to be able to talk to all of our personnel about what they can do to help people to not have to do that, and to be able to be present with supports that we could potentially offer to them. And then number 10, reduce the number of staff on temporary teaching licenses and reduce the number of open positions. We've talked about this, the difficulty in hiring people who are licensed teachers and licensed staff. We have offered professional development opportunities to people. We've offered mentoring. We have a future leaders cohort. All of these things are to try to support those teachers who have come on board with emergency or provisional licenses, working toward a permanent license. So permanent licenses usually take a couple of years, And we've worked hard to change that so that we have more licensed teachers, which is super important to our students' learning. Just a general overview of the Slate Valley Unified Union School District. We have 1,216 students being served in our district. 5 schools in Benson, Castleton, Fairhaven Grade, and Fairhaven Union Middle and High School, and Orwell. And we serve the towns of Benson, Castleton, Fairhaven, Hubbardton, Orwell, and West Haven. Then we're looking at our student enrollment. Unfortunately, it did decline, as you can see here, at 1,216 right now. Last year, we were at 1,232 students, and we had our high there at 2022-23 at 1,277 students. We continue to, as we just saw, try to bring more students into our schools, but knowing that the number of students in the state of Vermont, unfortunately, and New England has continued to decrease. We continue to have more students with greater needs. So the percent of students living in poverty, we showed this over kind of the COVID 5 years there on this graph. A couple of things about this graph. When I looked at it, I said, oh, wow, if you're looking at 2020 and 2021, and we're in the 30%, and then we go down to 25% in 2022, and then we go all the way up to 56%, what's going on there? So part of what went on is that in 2022 and previous to that, one of the ways we measured students living in poverty was by the free and reduced lunch count. So that was something that people, when you sign up for free and reduced lunch, that's what indicated whether or not you were in the kind of category of poverty. Now we look at Medicaid, whether or not you qualify for Medicaid. So it does skew the results somewhat, because free and reduced lunch is something that an individual literally signs up for. So they're not just given it, they have to do something to get there. And one thing I wanted to mention in this slide also is that a number of times we've talked about being the 11th poorest district in the state. And I just wanted to remind people, as I was talking about this, that it doesn't mean that our towns represent the 11th poorest towns. It's that the student population is the 11th poorest compared to other student populations in our state. And then we look at our percent of students with special needs, and as you can see, over the 5 years, it has remained pretty constant. And then we wanted to make sure we talked about some additional challenges that we have. So I think we've talked about this quite a bit, student behavior and what's happened with student behavior over the course of this kind of, 3 to 5 years that we've been talking about in these slides. Students are not as ready to learn as they once were. They don't necessarily come to us with a lot of preschool education. Preschool education can cost a lot of money for people. Obviously, transportation is challenging. There's many reasons why people can't necessarily bring their kiddos to environments that are more enriching. And with COVID and all the other things that have happened, kiddos aren't as socialized as they once were. So when they come to kindergarten, for some of these students, it's one of their first blushes at needing to be part of a small group, a team, a classroom, whatever it might be, that they're working with other students. And that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to learn how to work with somebody else. And it's particularly hard when you start doing it at 5 as opposed to, let's say, 2. So I commend everybody here who has done a great job working to ensure that our earliest learners are coming to our schools more ready, but we need a lot of support to be able to make that happen. And as we said here, also with the trauma that many of our students deal with, and kids have dealt with trauma for many years. It's not like trauma is new. I think it's just the number of students who deal with trauma now. That's what's caused us to need more resources to help support those kiddos again and learn in classrooms. And as I said before, we continue to struggle with qualified teachers and staff. There is a shortage of teachers nationwide, and we're doing everything in our power to get really good people on board, really knowledgeable people who we can hopefully help them with an education to be able to support them as classroom teachers and staff in our classrooms. And with that, I will hand it over to Glenn.
Good evening. As we've talked about in past years, a lot of pressure is put on the budget. And we've always been referring to things as unfunded mandates. Well, what are some of the unfunded mandates that the legislature has passed down to us? In 2021, we had Act 172 requiring radon testing. We also had Act 74, which required PCP testing. Both of those also require remediation if there's a problem found. But there's no funds provided for those remediations. In 2022, Act 29, in regards to access to our buildings, emergency operations planning, behavioral threat assessments. Anybody who's been around over the last 10 years, violence in schools has become way too widespread. And there has to be plans in place to try to prevent that. In 2021, they also required that schools must have a employee facilities director. We have other things such as, Act 35 ban on suspension or expulsion of children under 8. So when we have children that have caused problems, they're here. We're trying to educate them the best that we can, but that requires more employees to deal with some of these students. The list goes down through universal pre-K. Unfortunately, not all of our kids are taking advantage of that opportunity. In 2015, with the Clean Water Act, the 3-acre stormwater project. So any parcel of property that has 3 acres of impervious surface, that includes roofs, parking lots, roadways, have to develop a way of capturing all of that runoff and keeping it out of our waterways. Again, it's at taxpayer expense here in the district. One thing that has come back into play a little bit recently, we're hearing more about the Universal Meals, Act 64, that supplies breakfast and lunch to all of our students. It's no longer based upon need. The governor is asking to repeal that, and we'll see where that goes. More unfunded mandates, either from our legislature or from the federal government. Flexible pathways, lead testing in the water. The list goes on. Pension costs, access to menstrual products, access to contraceptives. We had to hire a food service director. So the list of mandates coming that impact our budget are great. The budget reflects the district's goals to support the recruitment, development, and retention of our educators. Provide the resources for valuable, relevant, engaging, and inclusive learning experiences. To contribute to the mission of increasing measurable student learning and reduce achievement gaps. continue to address deferred maintenance and infrastructure needs in all 5 buildings in the district. We are not alone. Most districts in the state have long laundry lists of deferred maintenance. Continue to support flexible pathways such as early college, dual enrollment, work-based learning towards graduation. Just to touch base with the development of the budget that you will be asked to vote on next week. Budget development started back in August and went through November. And it included things like projecting enrollments, reviewing staff needs. We held meetings in all the schools seeking public input. That information and everything was then, once we got into November and January, was reviewing and starting to formulate the budget. After numerous meetings and looking at the numbers, once we got into January, the Finance Committee recommends a budget for the full board to approve. That approval takes place in January because by law, we have to have a 30-day warning prior to voting on the budget. This year, it's March 4th. When it came to budget meetings and board meetings, it left us making that decision at the end of January. So now here we are, formally presenting the budget to the taxpayers and going to a vote next week. And I'm going to turn this over now to Julie Finnegan.
I want to make it clear that this is a school board development timeline. It's not a superintendent development timeline. It's not an administrative development timeline. It's our development timeline because that's what we're responsible for as a board. So we're the ones that determine when we get these numbers and how we do it. And this is actually earlier than we have started in the past. Part of this process when it comes to gathering information is also all the things that we've been doing for communications, which started earlier this year, making sure we're getting out in the community. So there's a lot of things that we did before we even got to November when we started actually looking at numbers. So I just wanted to make that clear. All right, so here's the nitty gritty of the budget. So you can see the budget total and the per student cost. The spending increases were wages based on negotiated contracts. Number 2 is an 11.9% increase in health insurance premiums and other related payroll benefits. And I'm going to let you know the other related payroll benefits so that you understand those. They are health insurance, obviously we just said 11.9%. Dental went up, $3,500. FICA went up, $44,113. Child care tax, that's the new tax that we have to pay to fund childcare in the state. That one went up $4,900. Retirement for employees went up $45,000. Tuition reimbursement, $48,000. Unemployment insurance, $26. You like that one. Workman's comp, $21,900. Life actually went down $8,000. Makes you wonder, but hey. Cell phones went up a little bit. Clothing allowance for custodial staff went up a little bit. And Section 125 fees, which are some fees we have to pay. So overall, the majority of the $2 million that we went up from last year is in benefits. Okay, and it's all those little payroll benefits that we don't think about when the insurance company comes. Think about the people who just lost their houses in California, right? We think about our car insurance for ourselves. It's all gone up. And schools are not immune to that. We employ people, we're responsible for the insurance behind that employee. So that's a big part of it. Increase of 4 FTE student behavioral supports in the elementary schools, 2 support staff and 2 teachers. There's a lot of work going into making sure that these people are trained appropriately and that we're hiring specifically for what we need. And continued investment in buildings and grounds. We've been saying for how many years now that we have deferred maintenance, and each year we cannot not put money in there for deferred maintenance. That's part of what we have to do. That's our fiscal responsibility to our buildings, our students, the health of our students. So that's something that's always going to be a spending kind of pressure on our budget. Spending decreases are a reduction of 2 FTE instructional assistants. So as you can see, we kind of 2 support staff above, reducing 2. We're shifting what we need them for. Same with 2 FTE elementary teachers to 2 teachers, okay? And when it comes to behavioral supports for students. Mentioned on previous pages, challenging time with students. Getting it early so that we end up, my dad always taught me, get it when they're young. That way it's not such a big problem when they're older, and that's the goal. Budget no longer subsidized Boys and Girls Club, as we read on here, childcare tax, right? That can be used for some of that. There's grants and support for those students. Our families will not have it. We will still have Boys and Girls Club. We're still offering Boys and Girls Club. We are just not putting any of our budget money into it. So that's the difference on that. So we can't help but compare ourselves to statewide funding. We're a statewide system. There's nothing we can do about that. So whether we're spending $11,162 on our students, if somebody like Rutland Town spending $13,417, we're helping. We're helping Rutland Town. We're helping Addison Central spend $16,099. That's the way the system works. And so we can't change that. So showing this is not to show all the time how low we are, but it's also to show that we're a part of the system. We're not standalone. We aren't supporting ourselves. They're helping support us and we're helping support them. So that's why we show this picture. So you can see where we are. We haven't changed much in our 11,700 number. Still going to be right around in there. Here's tax rates. Now, it's interesting because it used to be that's all anybody wanted to know when you walked into one of these. What's our tax rate? What's our tax rate? People are concerned about the spending, the 32 million. I get that. We're part of a system. That's what it takes. I explained the increases, and then here's how it's going to affect your taxes. Now, the numbers are not set in stone. We know that. We've been hearing that. Even I've heard that recently on the news. They don't set the numbers that really make this in stone until the end of this legislative session, which is not until May. So this is the best we can do with what we have for information right now. So as you can see, the parentheses mean decrease. So of the towns on the far right, 4 of the towns are seeing decreases and 2 of the towns are seeing slight increases. There is a caveat on the bottom that is also just a part, again, of our system, is that some people, these are for taxpayers that pay based on their home site, and an average of 66 of our taxpayers in our 6 towns pay based on the value of the home site and their income. Okay, which is a little bit of a different formula than just paying on your home site. All right. That is it. I think we are up for questions, which I will take and pass off if they need to be passed off. What? Oh yeah, people need to come to the mics, right? So are there any questions? Let me make sure they're on. I know. No, nobody has to ask a question. But we would like questions. Or comments. Or comments. Or anything. Yeah, you do, because that way the people online can hear you. That's the issue, not in here.
Sorry, I was over this question, I was kind of curious.
Yep.
And if you'd be kind enough to state your name.
Scott Hertzberg from West Haven.
Thank you.
With health insurance, does Slate Valley negotiate directly with the insurance company, or does all schools in the state negotiate?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Thank you for asking it, actually.
It's like a question, and I'm sure we can't
Yeah.
cure it unless we
Yeah.
move to Canada.
Yeah. So the state negotiates, it's a statewide healthcare negotiation. So it's educated, it's done by the state and the teachers union. And everything about that is the state and the teachers union. Everything from the premium costs and what kind of plans to how much is taken out of their paycheck. We literally have nothing to do with healthcare anymore as an individual district. It is 100% handled by the state. Yeah. Yeah.
Theoretically, we get a better deal because
Yeah,
we're, there's
theoretically, yes.
more individuals doing that.
Yes.
But-
But you're a separate fire from all state employees.
We are separate
Yes.
from all state employees. It's our union and
Something the state of Governor Scott would be, you would be
Yeah.
able to maybe
Yeah.
get a better deal.
that's a good idea, Casey.
All right.
No. What he was saying is, for the people online, is that, if we were more, not just on our own as teachers doing it, but the state did it as a statewide system with state employees as well. Because the Vermont State Colleges does theirs separately from the state employees too, right? And their state, right. So, yeah, so bigger pool could potentially mean better savings, but they're not there yet. So that would be good.
And in response to your question, I mean, you didn't ask this direct question, but I just want to make sure everybody understands that there are a couple of different plans that are offered to teachers. However, there's one set amount that the school districts pay in for that. And then the person can opt to have a plan that's a little bit better than another plan, but the person is paying for it. And all the deductibles are the same throughout the state. So it doesn't matter if you are a teacher in North Country, what's it called? I don't know, way up north, Burlington, or what, I was thinking of Northeast Kingdom, that's what I was thinking of, Northeast Kingdom or down to Bennington, you're paying the same amount.
I'm sorry, I walked with you.
That's okay.
What share of that 5%, whatever, increases the health insurance?
So I'd say, so the total, so it's $2 million $2 million increase. That's all right. It's an overall $2 million increase to the budget. Our total increase of wages and benefits was 1.6 million of the 2 million, right? And then you're talking, like I said, infrastructure and some kind of reallocation of teachers for what we need for behaviors are the increases. Yep. And then I say 1.6 million, that was the list of all the stuff that I read, not just health insurance. Health insurance itself went up $804,000.
Sorry, the mic thing, if you didn't say it before, is the people online,
Right.
there's probably, 35 people? They
Yeah.
can't hear, so sorry,
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to be a nuisance. So it's really not for us in this room, it's for folks that
Yeah.
they can't hear it.
It's all right. Any questions online? Nothing online? Okay. Yep. They would have to, they can raise their hand and then they would unmute themselves when you called on them. So,
Just, not really a question, just a couple comments. When we look at and you addressed it a little bit, the 32 million, that's sticker shock for a lot of people. Especially when we looked over, and not that many years back, our budget was 26 million. And it's really one where I understand how you explain, the equalized students and how that's going. I'd be interested in hearing from, I see we have some legislators here, some senators and representatives, of what's going on. I'd like to hear from them a little bit what's going on, because what scares the heck out of me is that this new funding formula that comes out and all that money we've been getting where one student counts as more than one to get us the monies that we're spending, all of a sudden something changes and we're in the mid-30s for the millions of what it costs us, and the help that we've been getting and gotten used to getting is gone. That's one area. The other one, I look at the budget and I'm looking at the slide on the spending decreases. I always go, when you put a budget together, I'm saying, what are the tough decisions that you had to make? I'm not looking at too tough a decision up there, and that would, can you speak to that a little bit about, and what if you want, and for instance, the 700,000 that we're using to put into capital reserves, I know you addressed deferred maintenance. Personally, I would have seen that taken off with how things are setting right now and not knowing. I would have felt more comfortable if you had that 700,000 deducted from the 32 million for just this year. And so that's my only comment.
yeah. So I can talk, I think to capital reserves, That's always like, even like as a family, like how do I, as a family, make sure that I'm okay for emergencies, right? And because our deferred maintenance is at an emergency level, having that 700,000, I think feels less risk averse than buying down kind of buying down the 32 million. I don't know if anybody else has anything to say about that. I don't know how we want to, right, we don't have anything in it right now. There's $40,000 in it, like we used it. So there's 700 would put it back up to 740. And I think that's a kind of a risk you have to take when you budget, even as a family, like how are you going to protect yourself from a catastrophe, right?
Understand that, but when I look at the budget, it has the highest we spent yet, over 4 million for buildings and
Yeah,
grounds
yeah,
in there.
yeah,
So I hear your,
Yeah.
I believe in reserves too.
Yep, yep.
But I'm saying sometimes you have to make a tough decision for budgets, and I just would like to see a little tougher
Yeah.
decision.
yep, no, I understand. Yep, we've been deferred for so long that what's in the budget right now is gonna at least get us through the year and start getting ahead of ourselves, hopefully, would be the hope. Yeah. Yeah, Peter.
On the reserve, that's in case we have an emergency or something. And last year we did have one and we used most of it because of that. So that, we put that in there because if something happens that we're not planning on happening or we aren't planning on addressing right now, we have the money. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the money to do it.
I also think about just what's going on at the federal level. So like I work for a grant personally, right? A federal grant from the U.S. Department of Ed. So you can imagine that I'm paying attention very much to what's happening at the federal level with that. And if we lose money from the federal level, we're going to have just tough decisions to make. And that 700,000 is at least protected for a catastrophe that could happen too. So there's so many balls in the air right now when it comes to budgeting. That the 700, I understand what you're saying, like we could buy it down, but that's a decision we made. And we made it like back in January, right, too. So before a lot of some of this stuff has changed too, which is very true. Yep. Does anybody else want to talk about funding formula? Is that what you're talking about, the funding formula, the way it's funded now with our students and what they're worth versus what's going to potentially happen?
I was looking at some point to get a little update on what's going on up here.
Right, gotcha.
What I'm talking about, just to get a
Gotcha,
sense.
gotcha. Yep.
Anyone want to speak to that?
So, yeah, go ahead. Yep, you
Let
wanted-
me make a motion to suspend the rule so that we can hear our legislators.
I think Tom made it clear in the beginning that we can do that automatically. Because he made a statement that's at the beginning of our meeting that says that we can hear people that are not members of our district.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, but I believe that's why you said
Yes.
that. Yep, okay. Do you want to hold it or you want to? Hold it.
So good evening. I'm Dave Weeks. I'm one of your three state senators, along with Terry Williams and Brian Collmore. I'm on the Senate Education Committee. I'm the vice chair. This is our third year, both Terry and I, on the committee. So we have some pretty in-depth background on what's happening across the state and what's happening in Rutland region, Rutland County. So first off, I wanted to address that the governor is trying to address two issues. One, we have the number one cost per student in the country. We just rose from, I think, number two last year, and last year's property taxes put us to number one. Second problem is our students are testing out with average scores, average nationally, and declining. So two problems. Number one, cost, middle of the pack, performance, and decline. Okay, so that's the fundamental problem. That's why the governor came forward this session with a lot of political capital on the line and said, you've got to do something. You've got to change this paradigm. So he, in cooperation with Secretary of Education, Zoe Saunders, developed a plan which kind of slow rolled through the first 5 weeks of the session and kind of you heard some things in the newspaper about, this potential change, that potential change. Well, tomorrow, when we report into work in Montpelier, we'll actually have the bill language in our hands, and we'll receive the first testimony on the real plan. Over the past 6-7 weeks, we've been getting kind of drips and drabs of what the potential plan, potential bill looks like. But now we'll have the actual language. That gives us something in the committee to go forward and massage that language into something that we can all live with, okay? So right now, none of us like all of it, and some of us have problems with aspects of the bill at this point. But the bill will change 100 times between now and May. And this one issue, education specifically, may stretch into June. We could stay there until June. Right. And there's some rumors that we may stay there until July to make sure we get it right. Nobody goes home until we've got it done. Okay. So the bill itself, and again, education specific, and I'll tell you at the same time, we're dealing with the energy issue, okay, i.e., potential carbon tax. We're dealing with housing. It's another big one. We're dealing with data privacy. We're dealing with the 3-acre rule. Who brought that up a minute ago?
It was on the unfunded mandates, yeah.
Okay, 3-acre rule. I'll tell you, if you want to, that's another big problem. Okay, so I call it the rainwater tax. We're taxing everybody, schools, businesses, municipalities. We're taxing everybody for rainwater. And now we all want clean water, but we're going to put a whole host of folks out of business on that one. So the bill that's coming into education, it's all about the reform of Vermont's education system for pre-K to 12. There are two primary issues we're dealing with. One is funding. This is property tax. This is what affects every single one of you folks. That's probably why you're here in the first place, attending tonight's meeting. And to the gentleman who asked the question, the concept as it exists tonight is that there's a foundation formula, which has a per cost, or not cost, but not per student cost, but
It's a base amount.
given to the school districts, funded.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
That's, that is $13,200 per student. Okay, and you're at 11,783. Okay, so there's a good bump right there. And again, to the gentleman's question, it still includes weights, and weighting is there's poverty weighting, there's an English language weighting, there might be another aspect, but there's several weightings that basically increase the funding per student back to the districts. Okay, so how does that answer your question? Okay, so that's one aspect. So the second bit, so the first bit is funding for students. The second bit is governance. How do we achieve some of these increases in funding for the students? So we're looking at a couple different things. So governance. Governance is all about administration, leadership teams. Okay, so we're looking at three aspects to that. One is the size of the district. Currently, we have 52 supervisory unions in the state. We have 119 districts in the state. We may have some redundancy in leadership positions. Okay, we want to try to make that more efficient. So I'm sure by this point you've read in the paper that there could be somewhere around 5 districts statewide. So you take 52 SUs, you take 119 districts, and you basically start compacting that into 5 districts. Well, will it be 5? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it'll be 25. Maybe it'll be 1. But somewhere in there, there's a solution where we can find some cost efficiency for the administrative teams. And I'll tell you, again, I think I told you this last year, you have some of the finest administrative teams, or administrative team in the state. So, these folks are doing what they're supposed to be doing, but we're trying to make it more efficient statewide. Okay, that's where we're going to get our savings. That's where we're going to get our increase for funding for the students, That's where we could get potential increases for teacher salaries, programs, et cetera. The whole change is about the academic experience of the student. Okay, that's the primary goal, not to get fancier buildings or pay staff more or what have you, pay teachers more. It's really about the quality of the academic experience for the student. Okay, and then to somebody else's point about school construction, we've done some studies on that. We have about a $6.2 billion problem over 20 years. We know what's wrong with the schools, but we've got to solve the issue of district size, school size, class size first. And from those three factors, districts, number of districts, district size, school size, what's the appropriate number of students in school, and what's the appropriate size of the classroom. Okay, we're gonna move all those levers to see what we can create for efficiency across the state. Okay, but I really want to emphasize that we're not going to do anything that jeopardizes the quality of academic excellence for the students. The whole point is to increase the academic programs. Okay, that's the whole idea. And then I just want to comment back the earlier slide about unfunded mandates. Just want to tell you that of all those 10 or 20, 2 pages worth of unfunded mandates, so the majority of the legislative team that's in here either voted against those or were simply not in their seats at the time that those things were passed, except for one, and that's the evidence-based literacy instruction. That one we thought was worthwhile. We're massaging it a little bit this year, but in any case, that's what you get when you have a supermajority. You have a limited number of levers you can pull, and some of you have to live with, and some of you can affect. Does that help any about Montpelier, status in Montpelier? It's kind of a nutshell at 40,000 feet. But I did want to add just one thing, that every minute that we're in a committee talking about these issues, they're all recorded. All the materials that we see, you can see. You can see every legislator's comments on every aspect of every bill. We're on YouTube 7 hours a day with our 2 committees, or in the House, a single committee. 7 hours. You can see everything that goes on, and you can see all the briefing materials that we receive. Does that help? Any questions?
I did this last
Okay. First, thank you very much. This is a first, I think, in all the meetings that I've been to over the years, where the legislators have come to the meeting and have specific programs, ideas to address, obviously, some serious problems that Vermont is having. You address some of most of what you were talking about has to do with administration. And that only has so much leverage in it financially. In this district, the percentage spent on administration is like 11%. Is that correct? So if you put all those compactions in, it's not really that big a number. That's one issue. Second issue is funding. Is there any discussion on changing funding formulas for localities paying into a state system? And then one more. The third piece of the puzzle is improving test results. There has been no discussion, public discussion, of curriculum that I could ever remember in a public forum. Is that coming up? We have a specific type of curriculum that's recommended for all districts in the state, proficiency-based grading, if I'm not mistaken. Has there been, and that's been in place for a fairly long period of time, yes. So just in the construction and thinking about a better model, will there be some discussion and participation, I hope, by the teachers even for the first time, in ways to improve a better teaching, I don't know, paradigm, or whatever you want to call the particular terms. So those are that's a lot of.
Okay, so yeah, you're gonna have to remind me. I'm gonna go backwards. That's how my mind works. So lots of levers that we're pulling to try to increase student performance. One of the aspects in the briefing was far too many, and I think it's like 17 or 20, somewhere near 20% of teachers are not either licensed or they're on emergency license provisions. Okay, well, some of them are, they're understandable, but we do have a teacher sourcing problem. So what we're looking at doing, again, we're trying to, the net effect is the whole net effect is trying to increase quality of the experience for the student. Okay, so one of them is broad-based look at programs. We think that from middle school and high school, we want to be able to offer students a range of programs that aren't necessarily always available in small schools. So there's two ways to look at small schools. One, they're driven by choice, meaning that some communities want to have small schools, and the other is geography. Some schools have to be small because there's a mountain range in between, or the dispersed nature of our towns and such. You mentioned statewide curriculum. Okay, I'm not going to go there because I'm not an educator, and that's not a topic for me to field, but there is talk about centralizing the curriculum more than it is now, so that the experience in Fairhaven is similar to the experience in South Burlington. Okay, and that we want educators to tell us what the right solution is there. And again, I'm not an educator. My tendency is to try to listen first, and then if they give us compelling reasons, then we'll try to, we'll support the most rational. What was the second?
Third.
Formula. Yeah, so the formula, again, it's foundation-based, meaning you have a set value, set funding value, plus weights. The weights are essentially, again, right now, draft, bill. The weights are really the same as they were, as they currently are. Poverty levels, you get increased weight, which means you get increased money. English as a second language, increased weight, increased amount of money, and then
Students with special needs.
Students with special needs. Yeah, we're not at all forgetting about special education. Very, very important. Okay, huge investment. Some of those special education dollars, you're talking 11,700 or whatever that was. We're talking $100,000 from some students, and they're from our community, and we've got to help them along. And some of that education, that's what it costs. And some of them, very few of those kinds of students would be here in this setting, but we do have specialized schools for them. Okay, so we're not forgetting about special needs and special ed. In the first question. Oh, the administration. Yeah, okay, they're easy to pick on, 11%. 11% of what is it, 3.2 billion? Hey, moves the needle. Okay, so that's all administration, and we're not going to get rid of all administration. We're just trying to make it more efficient. Okay, 52 SUs, 119 districts, with a student population of what is it, 77,000 or something like that statewide. Okay, we can do better than that. Okay, love them or hate them. Okay, we want the investment to be with the student-teacher contact. Okay, we want the administration to do all the miracles that they do. Okay, the leadership that they provide, but we're going to try to contract that. And there was savings there, hundreds of millions in savings there. Okay, but we're just at the starting gate for affecting these fiscal changes. So we don't really, some of it's administration, some of it's going to be schools, facilities. There's no limit to what we're going to look at and then potentially evaluate effect.
Yeah, can I just ask, because I think that also Tom mentioned something about the taxation, like it's right now in that property taxes. So are there any other areas that you're?
Yes and no. So I'm not a money guy. Where's the money guy? Yeah, so.
What's the question?
Property tax
Other
versus
funding
income
streams.
tax or other, there's lots of conversations. It's in the money committees. The money committees are really addressing the funding. We're trying to address like governance and building and facilities and program. And then there's another committee, the Government Operations Committee, in both the House and Senate. They're evaluating the school boards and how you're represented as a community to the new district, whatever size that might be. Okay, so governance, how do you vote for them? How many are there? How does the community engage with a very limited number of districts? So again, we don't have the answer to that, but we're evaluating that those cost drivers and those program issues. Does that help?
Yep.
So I'm here to confirm everything he just said. And I'm not as articulate as he is. I'm usually pretty blunt. Terry Williams, I'm senator from Rutland County and from Albany. And, one of the things that I want to give compliment to your school board and everybody that worked on the budget to keep it at $11,200 per student. Because we really don't know what the tax rate's going to be yet, because we haven't come up with that figure. So it's 5.9% above what it was last year as we sit here right now. But the BAA, the Budget Adjustment Act, when that comes out, will actually determine what the final tax rate is. So ideally, it will be zero, but probably it won't. So you did a good job to keep it at the same rate as where you were last year, basically. And with the new foundation formula, the 13,200, that's going to be as a result of what Senator Weeks just said. But they're also, I think, one of the unmentioned points of this whole plan is Act 60 and Act 68 are going to go away, which means that if a school district wants to spend more, they can, but they're going to have to do it at their own expense, and they're going to have to come up with their own funding. So basically, the state's saying $13,200 for every student, and then with weighting. But I think it's still going to be based on property value, and I really don't see a change there. So I'm not the vice chair of the committee, but I sit there, listen, and I take a lot of good notes.
And Senator Weeks and Williams, isn't it true that voters would not be voting on that foundation
Correct.
formula? There would be no voting on the
Correct.
school budget unless you were wanting to spend excess
Definitely
of the
another
state amount.
advantage, yes. And then the other thing we don't know is the federal funding. That's an unknown variable right now, but along with federal funding comes unfinanced requirements. So we're all going to be, we're all waiting for that shoe to drop. And so nothing is in concrete right now. What you heard tonight is the best that we have for information. And the education committees in the House and the Senate are working in parallel with the Finance Committee and the Ways and Means to find the best way to put this plan together. I have no educational experience, but I was a planner in a former life. So I'm waiting to put the plan together, but we don't have enough data to do that. So bear with us. Don't expect it to be happening in 2 months. It may not happen in a year. But when we get the thing done, and it's not going to be created in a vacuum either. We're going to do it with input from the field. And believe me, there's a lot of opinions on it. So.
Thank you.
I guess I have a question or a comment for the senators. You guys were saying governance is in the details, and we all know there's a lot of missing details in this plan. I'm really excited to see what comes out tomorrow. And I've said it before, but I do want to say it again. I'm very concerned about how the board is going to be structured, just based on our experience here. This is my second cycle of dealing with the school budget as a parent who's very invested in their kids' future. And there needs to be a meaningful way to remove board members when they do not follow the ethical guidelines and the mandate from the voters. And I want that to get to the right people, because right now we're stuck in a situation with a member who has been causing trouble, and there is no way to remove them legally. I've even called the governor's office about this, and I will keep calling until something is done. The protections for the IEP students, if our federal funding goes away, what is the contingency plan? That's a lot of money that is, I believe, all federally sourced.
Yeah, we get 2.7 million, right? We get 2.7 million right now in federal funds.
And that's for our most needed, like our most needy students. And they're not the only ones who get impacted if those funds go away. The whole classroom's impacted. We can't, to the school, because of the way it's structured, they can't accept volunteers off the street to help with the kids. You need to go through all this vetting and all of these processes to make sure that you can work within the school system. So even people who want to help, there's a lot of roadblocks to be able to help. The governor has spoken about taking some money to flatten the tax rate. Wouldn't it be smarter for us to keep that money for our schools in an emergency situation? Because what would that number be statewide? We're just looking hyper local. And I'm a taxpayer. I don't want my taxes to go up, but I care way more about those students than I care about having lower taxes. And I just wonder what kind of attention is being paid to this.
Okay, this time I wrote them down. Okay, so first off, I'll go from front to back. School board composition. Let's just say today, theoretically, there's 5 districts. Theoretically, in the bill, I think we'll see language that the board in a district will only have 5 members. And this is, again, all theoretical. 3 would be from particular wards. So, for example, one of the districts right now that's on paper is all of Rutland County and essentially all of Bennington County. Okay, that's one district. So Bennington would have a ward, Rutland would have a ward, the other ward, I don't know, maybe it's, it's not been determined, but there'll be a 3rd physical ward, and then 2 at-large members. The recognition is that 5 board members, look, you've got what, 13, 14?
Well, we should have 18.
We should have 18.
Okay.
But we have 3 open seats, so we're down to 15.
So you see the dramatic change in composition. That's a huge change. And that's why government ops committees, government ops in Senate and the House, will be wrestling with that issue. How do you do that? You create, with the exception of the governor and the 5 statewide elected officials, you're creating some of the most potentially influential political positions in the state. But again, devil's in the details. We don't know that bit yet, but that's the way it exists right now. Okay, just be prepared to see that morph over time. IEPs and federal funding. All I can recommend, and I tell us all the constituents, is when it comes to federal programs at this stage of the game, just pause, take a breath, see what shakes out. Don't go riding off into the night until we really know what's going to happen. Okay, and that's where I'm going to leave it. I recognize the impact on an infinite number of programs, the IEP program being one of them. Just pause. Okay. And then, funding. Funding to flatten out the potential tax increase. So yeah, maybe in the order of 70 million, I think, Bill, Representative Canfield can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the potential for the use of essentially reserve funds or other funds to flatten the property taxes for this year. Now, okay, that's good for this year. And what about the following years? Okay, well, so the intent is that we affect the cost to the education system next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, and thereon. That's where we get the real savings. And that's what we're trying to affect. So we don't want to just stumble around in the dark, give you another property tax increase because we don't evaluate the program for its fiscal constraints. We're trying to attack it now. So yeah, this year, a movement of money to flatten out property taxes. But I would say at least the net effect, like 2.5, 3 years from now, would be that's when you start seeing the real changes and the real savings. Okay.
So just to bring some perspective to the districts, those are just lines on a map. Nobody has really put any substance to it. Well, we had a meeting with the Secretary of State the other day. They're talking about doing establishing wards based on population, same way that they did for the districts during the last election. But we don't have a census, and there's nothing that says we have to do that. So the physical buildings, the schools, are not going to change. They're going to be where they are. One of the things that I said during our committee meeting the other way to the Secretary of Education was, hopefully this 13,200 we're cutting off the top, we're going to be able to take some money and put it away, because another thing we have is a moratorium on school construction. We need new buildings. We've got every school building has maintenance. So, and I actually see that the people of the districts are going to have a say in how these school districts are formed. So, just we don't know what we don't know yet, but we're going to work on it, and we'll come back periodically and give you an update when we have more information.
This is on? Yep. So Representative Bill Canfield from Fairhaven. I'm on the Ways and Means Committee. As Senator Weeks told you, the student wage will be included on top of the foundation grant. And the $13,200 figure, they may change. So we don't know that. We're talking about transparency in Ways and Means. So we're hoping so the Vermont taxpayer can understand what they're voting for at town meeting. So as your budget, you won't know until May what the tax rates will be. So these are things we are discussing. The Vermont guarantee, when Senator Weeks talked about you can tax locally beyond the foundation grant, that doesn't help the smaller communities to compete with the larger communities that have more revenues or more resources. But that would bring us right back to the lawsuit that got us to Act 60. So we don't want to do that. So $77 million from the governor's budget is recommended to buy down this year's taxes. We've all been cautioned, the House has, I don't know about the Senate, but any bill that you sign on to that is going to spend more money, that's going to be deducted from that $77 million. So, yeah, we're paying attention, and there's a lot thrown at us. I wouldn't repeat a lot of numbers, because they won't be the same.
Right, yeah. I agree with that. Perfect. Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Yeah?
You want to stand, you want to hold?
Oh, thank you. My name is Paul Stone from Orwell. I'm concerned about two things going forward, and I know nothing's been decided as of now, but the governor's proposal includes a lot more funding for private and charter schools. And I'm concerned about that because I think any money taken out of education put in private schools hurts the public schools, and I very much support the public schools. So that's something that really does concern me. The second thing is, as this gentleman just mentioned, the uneven funding. If you go with the foundation formula of 13,200, and then you allow other districts, especially Burlington, Chittenden, all the ski towns, all the districts that we had problems with before, we get right back in the same position we were, where we have districts who cannot raise as much money, essentially competing with districts that have all the money they want, and I think that's wrong. Thank you.
So I think it's important, thank you, Paul. So I think it's important that if you hear something, you hear a question or a comment, that at least we can react to it, because I don't want you to walk away tonight thinking any kind of half-truths or misunderstandings. So first off, private schools and charter schools. I don't think Vermont has any charter schools.
That's right.
Okay. So I hear that a lot, so I just wanted to correct that. Second, private schools. There are private schools in Vermont, but I don't think that's what you're talking about. You're talking about independent schools, approved independent schools, Burton, St. Johnsbury Academy, et cetera. So there's districts, there are operating districts, which mean a district that has a school in it, whether it's from K to 12, kindergarten to 12, or some kindergarten to 3, or what have you. Some towns don't have schools. So this is an operating district, you have a school. Some towns don't have schools. They're called non-operating districts. So they have to send their kids somewhere. They send them to either a school of choice, and I think you've got, what, 10 or so, or 10 more than you had last year? Something to that effect. So you get students from other communities because they either have a choice or they're non-operating and they don't have a facility. Okay, so in Manchester and St. Johnsbury, the two biggest communities, they take great advantage of the approved independent schools. So the school charges tuition, the school board, and they have a school board, they approve the expenditure, the movement of money from the taxes, the tax base, into the approved independent schools. Those are very important schools because without them, if we shut them down, first thing we got to do is build a school. Second thing we've got to do is try to get all that staff or some of that staff into that new school and create that academic environment for the students. So got to be a little careful about stepping on the independent schools too heavily. Okay, there is a very small incidence of Vermont taxpayers' money, education money being used in private schools, whether they're over the border or they're somewhere else where the family might be residing outside of Vermont because of whatever professional assignment or what have you. Those are drying up rapidly. Okay, and that's like maybe 100 in the whole state. So right now, approved independent schools, they provide education for only 4% of Vermont's students. So what we're really trying to address right now is the 96% of all the Vermont students who go to schools such as Fairhaven. Okay, that's a big distinction. And then the foundation formula, the 13,200, again, that's what it is today. Thank you, Representative Canfield. Could change tomorrow, but that's roughly where it is. If a more affluent community decides they want to spend more, the theory is, again, there's no real bill to put this against because we haven't voted anything yet. The theory is that a portion of that increase would essentially be cut and distributed to all the other schools. So I don't want to use the word penalized, but they could be, some of that tax increase that they vote on could be used for the rest of the state. That's the concept right
which is kind of what you already do. Because there is a spending threshold, right? Right now? Yeah, there is an excess spending threshold right now where you get penalized for spending too much, so it's not unique.
So a couple things that we have right now is we actually do fund for some students to go out of country. That, I heard that the other day, that's going to stop. All right, there's a lot of, some students go out of state, mostly in non-operating districts that don't have a school, and they live on the Massachusetts border or New Hampshire border, mostly New Hampshire.
Rutland Town.
Was it
Right,
Rutland
and-
Town, Ira?
Yep, and so that still has to get fleshed out, but it's on the radar. So, but two things that I don't want anybody to confuse is, number one, vouchers and charter. We don't even want to use those words, so. And I don't think we're gonna have to, so.
Julie?
Yeah. You can just talk because you have a microphone.
Sure. Tim Smith, representing the town of Castleton. I just wanted to provide a little bit of a different context to what the representatives have been speaking to. I think certainly any reasonable person can agree that the current system that we have in place is broken. It's not sustainable. It needs to change. And I certainly applaud the courage of the governor and all of our legislators on taking this challenge on head on this legislative session. You know, this school district is a pretty conservative school district. Certainly Rutland County is a pretty conservative county. I think all of our representatives here tonight are Republicans. And, you know, the proposal put forth by Governor Scott, this shock and awe campaign of massive consolidation and, you know, a big reduction in administrative overhead, you know, consolidating down to 5 districts, sharing of services. You know, certainly it holds a lot of appeal, right? But I would certainly caution people and just watch what's going on in Montpelier, ask questions of our representatives, because as someone pointed out with the foundation formula, this could very well be the last school budget that you all vote on, period. And we're all used to coming to these annual meetings and having direct contact with your local school board. Well, there could be one school board, Rutland, Bennington counties with 5 members, and you're going to have to phone in remotely to a meeting that's held in Bennington to get your voice heard. So I would just caution people. And also, you know, right now at Slate Valley, we're running our business at $11,162 per ADM. The foundation formula that's being proposed is $13,200. And, you know, what's basically been happening over the last couple of years is because of the waiting, we've been given the capacity to spend more money because of the needs that we have in this district, but we've chosen not to spend that money keeping our tax rate down because that's what you all wanted, voting our budget down 5 times last time. With a foundation formula of $13,200, they're going to give us that money per ADM, no choice. You might argue that our taxes are going to go up here in Slate Valley. So we've set the expectation pretty low, and I'm just wondering, the legislatures, are you in a position to support the governor's plan when ultimately you would be voting for a tax increase for your constituents? Because right now, our spending per pupil is so low. So again, a lot going on. Things are going to change many, many, many times. Maybe this process will get completed in this session. It might take multiple years, but I just encourage everyone to stay involved, ask questions, and don't take anything for granted.
It might be a rhetorical question. You're right, Tim. Our divisor has changed, right? What we're dividing by has changed. And with the new governance, our divisor could change again, right? Which would make maybe the 13,000 not raise our taxes if our divisor changes. I think the devil's in the details and the devil's in the math. And so thinking about that, kind of, if you're going to change the governance and you're going to change the number, it's all going to be, the divisor is going to be so different. So
yeah, we're so low. I'm just afraid
I
you
know,
guys are going
I
to
hear
find
you.
yourself in a position of supporting a plan that's ultimately going to raise the taxes for those who you represent.
So I'm not a politician. I really am not. I'm a pragmatist. But you know, we listen to our constituents. I really don't have an opinion. And when people contact me and tell me, the majority of the people tell me they want me to do something, I try and do what they want. We don't have to vote the way the governor, and I don't think the governor is that firm. I think he's putting a plan out there because we haven't had one. And I think by fleshing this plan out, once we get the thing so that the majority of the people are happy with it and it makes good fiscal sense, that he'll go with what we accept and what we come up with. So, you know,
I don't know if I have that faith in him, especially when the yield bill needs to be passed by June 30th. And he's not getting what he wants.
So one thing that Senator Williams forgot to say is that, okay, so the, let's say theoretically, 5 districts with 5 board members per district. Every community retains an advisory committee, which is essentially probably what the majority of the school boards morph into. Okay, that's the direct link between the community and the board. Now the board, how the school board at the district level listens to the advisory committees, well, that's going to play out in time. But that's where the direct link with the communities still exists. And I just wanted to comment on the shock and awe aspect of this. The voters spoke, governor listened, the governor initiated this effort, okay? Where it shakes out and what the net effect, what the net results are, still in process, okay? But at least he's expending political capital to address an issue that we all told him to address, and he's doing it. And now, to your point, the devil's in the detail.
Can I just ask that, from what I think you're having a good comment there.
Oh, yeah. From what I understand, the school board members, not the advisory committee that you just talked about, the school board members would be paid individuals, correct?
I believe that's correct, but
So-
I haven't heard if it's like a part-time day or.
Yeah, I meant that, you know, it would be like a paid position as
It
opposed
would be
to
at
an
least
elected.
quasi-professional.
or-
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Why do we still insist on putting the funding formula based on real estate values? That's never made sense to me. Because real estate value isn't necessarily a very good reflection of the ability of the householder to pay a tax. I mean, you can have a house in your family for 3 generations, you paid hardly anything for it, all of a sudden it's assessed at $500,000, you're on a fixed income, Social Security, it's a disjointed method. 60% of our people have some sort of income sensitivity now. Why don't you just go all the way to Bright and just make it based on income?
Because, and I've been through this for the last 5 years, actually, because I had a different plan to fund education. And what I was told, and they finally proved it to me, is that in a time of economic downturn, property taxes are the most stable to be using that to fund our education. You know, and a pretty significant amount of people in Vermont don't pay property taxes. But, you know, so I've heard some people say well, if it's a second home, we want everybody that's got a primary residence, a homestead, they shouldn't have to pay their property taxes into education. It should be everybody with a second home. That doesn't work. So, you know, we've had the union, the NEAs, in favor of income tax. But and there's going to be times when you're not going to have enough income to fund what we need to fund. So property tax is probably, that's the best answer I can give you. They're most stable.
Diane Spangenberg, this is off topic. I think a lot of people aren't asking any questions because you guys did such a fantastic job with these. It's amazing. And the things you sent back to our house, it's great. Heck, the best you guys have ever done. Kudos to all of you.
Thank you, thank you. All right. Any other questions? I want to go back back to one thing about making hard decisions, because I've been thinking about the entire time they've been talking, I've been thinking about this whole making hard decisions. I don't know if it's unique what we do. I honestly don't know if other school districts do this. Maybe Brooke can answer. But we don't start with what we did last year and see where we can cut. We start from zero and see what we need. So I don't know if that's why at the end, we're not making quote unquote hard conversations, because we've made them as we've worked through the process. Do we need 4 second grade teachers? Not, hey, we have 4 second grade teachers. What do we do with them? Do we need, right? So we start zero and build up every year. We don't start and look what we did last year and cut. Does that make sense? I don't know if that kind of helps, but it makes me feel like it's not that there's not hard decisions, but that we're not asking for excess because we're only asking for what we need. Because that's how we built the budget. That's just, my brain was thinking the whole time about hard decisions.
Yeah, Glenn Travers again. I don't want you to take that as a slam and not making hard decisions. What I'm saying is, when I don't have enough money, I decide what I am going to do without.
Right.
What I don't see, and maybe I just don't see it because I don't see the finance committee when they're working, I don't see you struggling with, this is what we need. Our budget just will not sustain that. What can we do differently?
Right.
And that's all I was looking, it looked a little.
Yeah, and I hear that, and I think we always think about, I keep going the wrong direction with this thing. I am going the wrong direction, sorry. I always think about this, our overall number, our 11,783, and I know what happens up north, and I know what happens down south, and I know what happens, right? And I always think, well, 11,700, at least for me, I'm like, we're not moving the bar very much. We didn't ask for more. The only increases were basically our wages and our benefits, which we have zero control, but limited control over. So yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I feel like it's like we make the hard decisions along the way as we're building the budget up, not at the end on how do we cut it down. So that was just my thinking. Anybody else? All right, I think it's it. I think it's you, yeah.
Highly in her desire to start our presentation.
What I do.
Skipped over a few.
Sorry about that.
I need a motion to approve the annual salaries for the school directors and other elected officers in the school district. The board chair gets $1,500 and members get $1,200. Need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next, shall the voters of the school district authorize the board of school directors to borrow money by issuance of bonds or notes in excess of anticipated revenues for the next fiscal year? And this is the whole group. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. So we're done.
Yeah,
Is-
transact any other business. Yep.
Okay, we're good?
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody online have any questions? We're good. Again, I really want to thank our legislators for,
Oh, no. Tom, do we at all want to say like Article 7 about transferring, like them knowing what's on the ballot?
should. I don't,
The ballot's different this year.
that's not voted on in the,
No, it's just, we usually read it so that people know what we're asking for, but maybe they did already on their own, and we don't need to go over
I
it.
think we did that.
Okay.
Okay. No, that's it. Again,
That's fine.
thank you legislators. It's a discussion long overdue, but meeting dismissed.
Whoa.
Are we at number 6?
I know.
Yes. You have other business?
Yes, I have other business. I think operating a school district, is this on?
Yes.
As large as this one, as important as this school district, balancing the needs of students, parents, school board, the public, the state, and everybody in between. I think that Brooke has done a wonderful job, and I congratulate her and thank her.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to also, I know we're adjourned, but I just also wanted to say thank you very much for everybody coming out again, and particularly our legislators for all the time you spent here. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.